Recorded. Okay, guys, it's showing me right here that we are live. So, because you know what's happening with the algorithms, I'm going to need for you guys to do your part. I need for you to share, make sure you like and post and call your friends, let them know that the class is in session. So, today we're going to talk about GMO, genetically modified organisms, with Jeffrey Smith. And I don't know if you know how important this is, but this is pretty special. And then we have an extra bonus towards the end. So stay tuned because it's time to fasten our seatbelts because we're going to learn and grow together. Here we go.
The Lillian McDermott Show.
We love, we fear, bridges we burn, we make mistakes, then we live and learn. When life gets tough, and it seems like your best ain't good enough. If you're in need of hope, you know where I'll be right here, right here. And when you need a friend, you can count on me. I'll be right here, waiting for
you. This is the place you can always turn to when you need a friend. The Lillian McDermott Show. To reach out to Lillian, visit her on the web at whenyouneedafriend.com. Now let's all learn together. Here's Lillian McDermott.
Hello, my listening friends and viewing friends. It's so nice we can meet each other on the air on this beautiful, best day ever. And for those of you who are new to the Lillian McDermott radio show / classroom, please know I've been waiting for you. This is a safe place where you can go to when you need a friend. It is my commitment to provide alternative ways to heal, and it is my mission to make awareness, responsibility, and truth a part of our everyday life. And I hope you, my listening and viewing friends, will feel empowered to embrace a new truth and live the life of your dreams. Now, as you know, we have talked about health and wellness and changing your life since 2011. Now, we've talked about genetically modified organisms in our food, but we've never really, we've been reaching out to Jeffrey Smith since 2000, probably 15, 16, but we finally got him here. But let me tell you about this because there's so much we don't know. It's in all our food. It's in a lot of our food. And it is something that we need to know about. So if you make an informed choice and you decide this is what you want to do, fine. But at least know what's happening. And so what are these genetically modified organisms? Well, there's no one other than Jeffrey Smith to be able to tell us what it is, what we can do to kind of spare our body from them, and even more. But Jeffrey Smith, so that you know, I just want to make sure you understand that he is an internationally bestseller author, filmmaker, executive director for the Institute of Responsible Technology, and leading spokesperson on the health dangers of GMOs. With all the modifications that are going on in our food, but also in the year 2020, it's very fitting that he would be here today to not only talk about GMOs, but this magnificent new normal that we are all wanting to embrace. And since it is our sole purpose in life to give and receive love and knowledge, I am so grateful that Jeffrey Smith is here finally to do just that. Thank you, Jeffrey, for coming on to the classroom.
My pleasure, Lillian. I'm so glad to be here.
Well, tell us a little bit about your background and how you got involved with, we're going to call it GMOs, but they're genetically modified organisms.
Yeah, I've been doing this for 24 years. I've given 1,000 talks in 45 countries and have a couple of books and 4 movies and helped build a movement. And I didn't plan to start out as a movement builder. In fact, I'm building a new movement now that I'll tell you about. And I am planning, and we're doing it with all the 25 years of experience with this new movement related to GMOs. But I just learned from a genetic engineer who blew the whistle in a lecture I went to in 1996 that the technology was prone to side effects, that it was not ready for prime time, and it was about to be put into our food. So everyone that eats could be damaged, and that turns out to be the case. We have a lot of information showing that GMOs are not only seriously dangerous, but likely contributing to more than 30 diseases, probably way more than 30 diseases that are on the rise in the US population, rising in parallel with the increased use of the GMOs and the Roundup sprayed on most GMOs. I'll explain that. But also, the scientists explain that once you put a GMO into the environment, you irreversibly corrupt the gene pool. You put it out there, it crossbreeds, it will reproduce and create offspring and offspring and offspring and offspring. And you now have a self-propagating genetic pollution that is impossible to recall. And so we pioneered the messaging on the health dangers because we realized that was the Achilles heel of the biotech industry that was planning to genetically engineer and patent virtually every commercial seed in the world. That was their stated goal, Monsanto in particular.
Mm-hmm.
And we needed to alert the consumers. And so now, for example, in my latest film done with Amy Hart, it's called Secret Ingredients. It talks about people who switch to organic food and they get better. The autistic sons in the film no longer on the spectrum. The infertile couples have children. The people shed the diseases. They turn around brain fog and overweight and skin conditions and cancer and all sorts of diseases. And these are described by the doctors not as one-offs, but as typical experiences that they have in their own practices every day when they take people off the GMOs and the Roundup sprayed on them.
And, it is hard all the classes that I've been doing lately, especially since what's been happening, because I don't want to even say the name because, the moment you say the name, you get flagged and then you get demonetized or whatever. But ever since the last 5 or 6 months, the things that have been happening, the deeper we've been digging in, the more we realize, wow, we are not being taken care of by the people we thought were taking care of us. And for any of you that are out there that think that it's okay to give away your power, just know that there are very evil entities out there making decisions over your health. So when it comes to GMOs, we have become so desensitized. We hear the word genetically modified organisms, and it started because we wanted to make sure our produce didn't collapse or that it would last longer. So who comes up with something like this? It's almost like we're trying to eliminate God and create our own earth.
Well, GMO could be described as God move over.
Oh, there you go.
And so the company Monsanto was selling Roundup herbicide with the chief poison glyphosate. And their patent on glyphosate was going off in 2000. And so what they did is they created Roundup ready crops, starting with soy, corn, cotton, canola. And now there's also sugar beets and alfalfa for the Roundup ready versions. And they introduced these seeds that could be sprayed with Roundup herbicide and not die. So you could spray right over the fields with a weed killer, and it wouldn't kill the crops like it normally does, but it would kill all of the other weeds. And so the weeding became easier for the farmers. But you're now spraying our food with a toxin, and what happens? It gets absorbed into the crop. There's a surfactant that drives it through the tissues, and it ends up inside the food that we then eat. Now, this means we're getting a double dose of what I consider poisons. The GMOs, which have been shown to do all sorts of damage, from early death and organ damage and problems with the next generation and immune system damage, and also the Roundup and its chief poison glyphosate, which is also linked to dozens of diseases and dozens of problems in our foundation of health, like gut bacteria, the ability to absorb minerals, our mitochondria, our neurotransmitters like serotonin and melatonin, our hormones are causing cancer, according to the World Health Organization. So we're now eating food that is, in my opinion, poisonous, and that this is driving up disease. But what it did is it increased the ability for Monsanto to sell their version of Roundup. So when it went off of patent, the farmers had signed a contract that if they buy the Roundup Ready seeds, they'll buy Monsanto's glyphosate-based herbicides like Roundup rather than the Chinese knockoffs. So it was designed to produce and sell more chemicals. That was the primary reason they genetically engineered. Now, there's another form of genetic engineering called gene editing, which is also extremely dangerous, whether it's the traditional genetic engineering where you literally take a gene gun and blast genes into a plate of cells, or use bacteria to infect it, or you use these gene editing techniques. They both create massive collateral damage. And the number one most common result is surprise side effects. But the main difference from gene editing to the traditional is that it's so cheap. You can buy a gene editing do-it-yourself kit on Amazon for $169.
Oh my God.
So you can create and release a new organism into the environment that'll be there forever. And now, for example, in 1859 in Australia, they released 24 rabbits so that you could hunt rabbits so that the people coming from England would feel more at home. Well, rabbits multiply like rabbits. And by the 1920s, they estimated 10 billion rabbits. It ravaged the countryside. There was no natural predator. So now imagine that we have an ecosystem where not only are we introducing one new organism, but we're replacing all of them. Everything from the algae to animals, bacteria to butterflies. We're taking the entire nature's ecosystem and giving it to all of the academicians, all of the companies, all of the basement hackers, and giving them the ability to replace nature and corrupt the gene pool forever. An example of that is the Mosquito Control Board in the
I wanted to talk to you about the mosquito.
They just approved 750 million mosquitoes to be released over 2 years. And we already know that those mosquitoes can permanently change the gene pool. And that's just one species of mosquito, let alone all the different species out there that could be replaced. So just to tell you about the two movements, 24 years ago, we started a movement to change people's diet by exposing the health dangers. And now we've been massively successful. 51% of Americans believe GMOs are unsafe. That's more than we need to create the tipping point so that the food companies respond. They are responding. They're removing GMOs more and more. But your choices in a supermarket will not stop the mosquitoes, the algae, the bacteria. Consider this. There was a bacterium that was created and almost released in the 1990s that theoretically could have ended terrestrial plant life on the planet. All of it, because it destroys the root system and turns into alcohol. There was another bacterium almost released in the 1980s that could theoretically have altered weather patterns on Earth because bacteria is involved in the creation of rain, snow, and sleet. And this was the same type of bacteria that was made impotent. And if that displaced the original, it means the wind coming off the West Coast, like I'm in California, would not necessarily condense and create rain like it does now. So those are just two types. Now, so we have been very successful at educating people about the health dangers to drive new changes in their food supply. So now we have to start an entirely new movement to create government regulations and general understanding that we have arrived at an inevitable time in human history where we can easily redirect the streams of evolution for all time. And yet we do not understand the implications scientifically of those introductions, and that what we're doing is planting biological time bombs. with a technology prone to side effects into an ecosystem that we cannot understand. It is not rocket science. It is much more complicated. And yet every single person with $169 can create a new organism, and the ability for them to create, and the price is going to go up, the price is going to go down. And unless we stop it, is an existential threat that 8 out of 8 audiences that I spoke to when I was last able to give public talks all rated it as more dangerous than climate change. And
Wow.
it's not something that's controversial. It's arithmetic. You simply introduce more and more species, increase the risks. And so we're creating a new movement to protect nature now. That's the website, protectnaturenow.com, so that we can lock down the releases, protect nature for all future generations, and give us a stewardship where we realize that we have the requirement now, because we have the technology, to have a wider perspective to embrace the health and functioning and sustainability of all living beings now and in the future.
There's so many directions I can go in there, but I want to make sure we discuss everything that we want to discuss. So for those of you who are tuning in for the first time, just know that if you have any questions, please type in a Q and write your questions, and we'll ask either during the Teacher's Pet Corner or while we're in the middle of the broadcast. But I also need for you to start sharing this information, like it and follow, and invite your friends to come in by tagging people in the comment section, because the algorithms are changing the way the information gets out. So the only way we can make this grow, the classroom, the information that you're hearing from Jeffrey Smith, is by you doing something about it, which right now, what you can do is you can tag and you can invite people to come into the classroom today. So everything you talk about, because I know that there's a spider goat, and there are so many different things. Like you go, I can't believe that this is really happening. It's almost demonic forces out there. Like you said, it just came to me as you were saying. I was saying we're trying to recreate God. We're trying to recreate the earth that God created. And when you said, God move over, that is exactly what I have been feeling like as I am preparing a little bit more for today's class. And so with that in mind, when people see GMOs, and when people, they're feeding their children, they're buying chips and Fritos and all these things that have, some of the major problems. Will they know how much testing goes into this product? Because everybody thinks, oh, if it's FDA approved, it's got to be good. So I've learned a little bit more than that in the last 6 months. That is just not so. So let's talk a little bit about, because your laughter says it all.
All right, there's 2 things. One is, what do you buy? And the second is, who's looking out for you? So in terms of what you buy, we've talked about genetically engineered organisms, and those are dangerous in themselves, and they're also dangerous because they're sprayed with Roundup, most of them. There's also GMOs that, like potatoes and apples, that don't turn brown when you slice them. Very dangerous, because the component that shuts off the gene that turns brown may reprogram your DNA. So if there's pre-cut apples, or, just don't eat the potatoes and apples that may be genetically engineered. And there's also other GMOs that we'll talk about. Now, in addition to the GMOs, Roundup herbicide is also sprayed as a desiccant, a drying agent, just before harvest, particularly on the beans and the grains. So oats have higher levels of Roundup than the Roundup Ready soybeans, because they're sprayed 3 to 5 days before harvest, and they just absorb in through the oats the glyphosate. Wheat, same thing. So you can have a non-GMO bowl of oatmeal, you can have non-GMO loaf of bread, and it will still be saturated with Roundup or its chief poison, glyphosate. Hummus contains the chickpeas, which are sprayed. Mung beans, lentils. It's also in wine and beer and orange juice. It's pretty much pervasive. You can go to responsibletechnology.org. That's our Institute for Responsible Technology's homepage, responsibletechnology.org. And you can get a list of the test results of what products have what levels of glyphosate residues, so that if you can't get organic would be the best. Organic means you don't have GMOs or Roundup allowed. So it's easy to buy things that are organic because they're labeled as such. There's a lot of requirements for organic. But if you can't get organic, at least avoid the GMOs and the products that have high levels of glyphosate. Now, what you can expect is, for some people, it will be life-changing. The chronic conditions for you and your family may turn around like you wouldn't believe. If you watch the film Secret Ingredients at secretingredientsmovie.com, you will know that there is something going on that you didn't know about, and you'll probably frantically tell all of your friends, especially those whose themselves or their families are suffering from chronic conditions, because you've seen the people in the movie change.
Yeah.
Now, the next question is, who's taking care of us? Well, the biotech industry, in particular Monsanto, according to the FDA and others, have had a legendary influence on the regulators. And they convinced the first Bush administration that the GMOs would increase the US exports and reduce the trade deficit. And so the Bush administration told all of the regulatory agencies like the FDA to promote GMOs as a mandate. That is one of their responsible acts. Since then, promote GMOs. And by the way, regulate them. How did they regulate them? They created a new position for Michael Taylor, Monsanto's former attorney, later Monsanto's vice president, later the food safety czar under the FDA for the Obama. But when he was first at the FDA as the deputy commissioner of policy, he was in charge of the policy over GMOs. And we now have evidence released from a lawsuit that the scientists at the FDA determined GMOs were dangerous. They could create allergens, toxins, new diseases, and nutritional problems. They said they required toxicological studies, human clinical trials. When they submitted their recommendations to Michael Taylor, it came back systematically removing the concerns of the scientists to what became the policy in May of 1992, which said, we don't know of any difference between GMOs and non-GMOs, a lie, fraud. And on that fraudulent basis, no testing was necessary, no labeling is necessary, and companies like Monsanto could release their GMOs without even telling the government, without even telling the FDA. That it remains the policy. It remains the policy. So when I go to other countries, their health ministers or regulatory agencies say, we don't have to test for GMOs because your FDA did it. When we speak to the FDA, oh, we don't have to do it because Monsanto determines whether it's safe. We look at the Monsanto studies and they're rigged to avoid finding problems. They don't do real testing. What they do is as little as possible to get their foods on the market as quickly as possible. And that was a quote from a scientist who said that was the biggest shock of his life, to read the submissions by the biotech industry to get their foods approved in Europe. He was hired, he was given a grant by the UK government for about $3 million to figure out how to test for the safety of GMOs. He was one of the top scientists in the world in his field, Dr. Arpad Pusztai. His protocols were to be instituted Europe-wide as the official safety testing protocols, and he was the leading expert. He was given the 6 or 7 submissions by the biotech industry to read, to give a recommendation for a minister who was having a vote in Brussels, and he said it was the biggest shock. He later got fired from his job and threatened, and all these things because he discovered that GMOs were dangerous, and he revealed that. And he said reading their submissions was a bigger shock than discovering that GMOs were dangerous, than being fired from his job after 35 years, because it was such terrible science. And that's the safety net with absolute holes in it that these things fly through. He discovered from his own genetically engineered potatoes that they caused potentially precancerous cell growth in the digestive tract, smaller brains, livers, and testicles, partial necrosis or damage to the liver, damage to the immune system. And he said that was generic. It was the process of genetic engineering that caused those dangers, those damage in just 10 days in his rats. And that same process was used in the food that we're eating. And so we could be submitting the whole population, exposing them. And yet none of the research that was done by the biotech industry would have uncovered any of those problems. And so who is in charge? We are. We have to step up, and we have to determine what we call food and what we put in the other side as food-shaped objects. We have to not believe the biotech industry's rhetoric or their enforcement wing in Washington. We have to go forward for ourselves and our families. And we have to tell others about it, because there's a disinformation campaign out there to try and convince us otherwise. But when people switch to organic and they take notes and they see that their energy level is different and they're losing weight and their symptoms are going down and their skin conditions clear up and their sons and daughters are changing in the way that they're relating to others and whatnot, and even the animals, the dogs and the cats, when the dogs act like more puppies and the cats act more like kittens and they have energy, etc., and we have documented evidence about that, then it becomes clear we have to remove the poisons from our diet on a daily basis.
And all of that makes sense. But here's what we're getting is that people are lulled into thinking that if it's on the shelf, it's got to be safe. And so we're looking at conventional growing, and we also look at organic, and then you have the GMO, the non-GMO project, and you have all these labels. And just recently I interviewed, and I've interviewed him before, but this is the first time he had ever said this in the classroom, is Dr. Steven Sinatra. Dr. Steven Sinatra was talking about the labels, and we were talking about cholesterol. And even when you're looking at the label for trans fat, it'll say 0 trans fat. But he said in the classroom that if you look at the ingredients, and in those ingredients, if there's cottonseed oil, if there's canola oil, any kind of oil, you for sure have trans fat. So how is it that the labeling can be manipulated as well, so that we're also duped by the labels?
Well, because the FDA was mandated to decide on the labels years ago, and they did tests of consumers and realized that if GMOs were required to have labels, it would suppress the sales. And so they said it can go on the market without any labels because, again, they're promoting GMOs. Now, I was part of the fight that tried to get states to require labeling, and then the lobbyists jumped into Congress and said, we shouldn't allow states to require labeling of GMOs, and so they preempted it. In 2016, it was supposed to be enforced like the next day in Vermont, and it was replaced by a preemptive legislation saying, no, we'll require labels at the federal level, and we'll make it the USDA's responsibility because they've always been run by Monsanto-friendly people. Mm-hmm. And so the USDA came out with their labeling scheme, and it's basically a facade. There's no real labeling. You can do a QR code. They have something called BE, which is basically a smiley face, which is bioengineered. No one knows what that means. They have almost every GMO is accepted, so that it's like the loopholes are 95% of the products on the market, on the shelf, will not be labeled. So it basically means nothing. Okay. And what we have to do is we have to find things that say non-GMO, and ideally non-GMO project verified, but that will still not guarantee that it's not sprayed with Roundup. So organic, or if you go to your farmer's market, you know that it's non-GMO and not sprayed, or stuff that you make yourself, those are the labels to look for.
Wow. Okay. So we do have some questions. So hold tight, because I want to get to some of the questions that I have here. I want to go back to the mosquitoes when you were talking about the engineering portion of it. Many years ago, we were hit with the Zika virus. We know that there's a patent for Zika. I've had others come on the classroom and say, hey, there are mosquitoes that are released that have certain viruses in them, and they're released, and they're sent out, and they're out there. Is it possible that Zika came from a mosquito that was genetically modified?
Well, I have no idea if the Zika is related to that, but there's an effort to try and, quote, prevent Zika. And
that's the new lie.
Yes.
Okay.
So, I mean, they're now, the Department of Defense are working on insects that will carry viruses that'll genetically engineer crops in the field. And those aren't released yet. The company Oxitec in the UK created a type of genetically engineered mosquito where the offspring was supposed to die, but it was supposed to mate with the wild population. So you keep releasing millions and millions and millions of mosquitoes, and you drive down the population so that this variety of mosquito would not carry Zika or dengue. Now, it turns out their testing was ridiculous. They never tested the full composition of the saliva, which circulates in our blood. If there's a female biting mosquito, it could damage the ecosystem. It could be replaced by the tiger mosquito, or and that could be more dangerous than the other mosquito that's being wiped out. And they also failed to predict completely that even though they said there would be no lasting effect in the gene pool, that was proven wrong. Up to 60% of the test samples done in Brazil after millions were released found that the gene pool was corrupted by this release. We tried very hard over the summer to stop the South Florida Keys Mosquito Control Board. They did vote to allow 750 million of these newfangled genetically engineered mosquitoes to be released in the beginning of next
2001.
year.
21. Yeah.
And that's over a period of 1 or 2 years. And we think it will be a disaster, or could be a disaster, and we're still going to try and stop it.
Okay, so is there a group? That's going to be my next question, because we feel powerless.
So
it's like
here's
all these decisions are being made, and we are just allowing it to go. We're allowing it to flow.
So I would suggest that everyone goes to responsibletechnology.org and sign up for our newsletter, because we have a message of empowerment, and there are things that people can do. And when we're ready, we can talk about the surprise that we're going to talk about, which is a level of empowerment beyond anything that you may be able to imagine. It's just an incredible time right now.
Yeah.
Most people look at this time as a devastation and as a shock, but there's actually something else going on.
This is a wake-up call. If I have ever seen a wake-up call, this is one for us all to wake up, and so with that in mind, I do want to talk about what we can do to remove the effects, because in the research that I've done, and you've done such a great job of making us all aware about the importance of GMOs, because we've been desensitized. We hear and obey. We hear and obey. And so that's why I say nothing we say in the classroom, believe. Do your own research, because if you're just repeating what we're saying, you're doing no different than what they want us to do in the mainstream media. You have got to take this information, research it, so now it becomes your truth. And where I want you guys to all come together is at whenyouneedafriend.com. That's the website where we all come together and we take 100% responsibility for the life that we want. So please subscribe while you're there. While you're there, also, like and follow and share it with your friends, because I'm telling you, this is the only way that classrooms like this, information like Jeffrey Smith's, is going to get out there. Because you look at GMO, oh, it's just an ingredient. But what does that ingredient mean? It is time for us to take our health back. It is time for us to take our life back. And where we start is at whenyouneedafriend.com. While you're there, please check out my sponsors, because without my sponsors, there would be no class. And we've got Keep Me Safe Organics. We're talking about beauty products that are, non-synthetic, because that's another place where they hide things. Synthetics, they don't have to tell you certain ingredients. So you want organic, you want non-synthetic. Keep Me Safe Organics is beauty products from head to toe. First Alternative Care, where you can get medical help for your entire household, whether it's family practice dermatology, unlimited, by the way, or 3 hours a year behavioral health counseling for your entire household, with the price of whenyouneedafriend.com for $19.99 for your entire household. The pharmacy in Merritt Island, we have Live Longer Medical, and of course we have Ground Therapy, Brain Tap, First Alternative Therapy as well, which is microcurrent technology. If you go to my Shop Now bag, you will find them there. You get a free 15-day Brain Tap trial, and pretty soon you'll be able to go into my Shop Now and learn more about this surprise that we have later on. But please support our sponsors the way that they're supporting the classroom. And last, and this is going to become the greatest ask of my life. I don't like asking for help, but I think I'm being humbled to do so. because we don't know what the situation is with the algorithms and if these classes, if these programs are going to be able to continue, I'm going to need your help. I'm going to need your support, because a lot of the sponsors are having a difficult time being sponsors. So they have to survive themselves. So I need the generosity of all of you who are students in the classroom that are seated in the front row. And don't tell me you're seated in the back row, because everybody has a front row seat in the classroom. So make sure if you can donate $1 or $1,000, please make sure, because we are looking at other options to continue this information. And as a certified life coach that I have been for a while, I'm telling you, we have got to be self-cleaning ovens. We've got to learn how to ask for help. And I am telling you, we are at that point. We're at that point. So please consider donating your time, your talent, or your treasure. So today we're talking to Jeffrey Smith, and Jeffrey is the expert on GMO. And I'm sure that you've heard of GMOs. You've heard that the GMOs are dangerous, but you still eat them when you go to your Mexican restaurant and you're gobbling down all those chips with salsa that you think is free. It is not free. It is hurting your body. And that costs something more than money. So I want you to start thinking, when you see GMO, if they're even labeling it, what you're doing to your body. So I wanted another documentary, Jeffrey, that you were in was Genetic Roulette. That
Yes.
kind of is a great get you started on because I saw that a long time ago. And then also you had mentioned secret ingredients. Where can we find secret ingredients?
At secretingredientsmovie.com, or you can go to livehealthybewell.com, where we have secret ingredients. We have a program to help you detox, rebuild, and repair from exposure to pest, exposure to GMOs and Roundup. We have a 90-day program to help you establish an organic lifestyle. Basically, that's the life transformation page, livehealthybewell.com.
Okay, very good, very good. Okay, so one last thing before we shift to the little surprise that you want to talk about, which I 100% support, spirit, mind, and body, a transformation. And so with that in mind, before we start talking about that kind of transformation, I do want to talk about what can we do to repair the damage? Because with what I have learned, it almost feels like we're transmitting this genetically modified new DNA within us to our offsprings, and we have got to become generational pattern shifters. So what can we do to mitigate this problem within our body?
It's an excellent question, and it's actually a very popular question I've gotten in 1,000 lectures. So I always used to say it's above my pay grade because I'm not a scientist or a health practitioner, but I started talking to scientists and health practitioners and product formulators and protocol developers who were answering the question. So I created an entire online program called Healing from GMOs and Roundup. And I asked, Dietrich Klinghardt and Joe Mercola, and I mean, just tremendous.
All
Zach
teachers
Bush.
in the classroom, yeah.
Yeah, like basically all the headliners, because I know them all because we're always on the same
Yeah.
conferences. I speak to the medical conferences about this, and they had very specific protocols. They developed products. And so if you go to livehealthybewell.com, you can tune into that. And if you subscribe there, as we come up with more understandings, like the stabilized sulforaphane that can protect against the effect of glyphosate from dropping our NRF2 and our gap junctions, very specific details. But what does that mean? It means now our cells can talk to each other. Now our bodies can detox. Or the sauna that we've identified that can help with the full spectrum sauna, help support the mitochondrial health, et cetera, that were recommended by the speakers that we were able to find. So it's a much bigger answer. And because I'm not a health practitioner, yeah, I'm not going to try and condense their protocols into one thing. I'm not qualified. I'll just throw everything at people and say, you've got sovereignty. You listen to the experts that I think have something to share, and you can decide whether you want to adopt what they're suggesting.
Yes, yes. And we've got lots of comments. Just hold on a second. So before we move on, let me see if I see any cues on YouTube. Lots of comments. And Let's see. I know that I saw some cues.
We're teasing people with this big announcement.
I know. But wait, there's more.
It's worth waiting
Okay.
for, believe me.
Yes, absolutely. So let's see. I know that I saw some cues because I don't know. Jeffrey, do you know if you're going to have to leave right away after
I
the
can
class?
stick around and I can answer those questions right after.
Okay, perfect. Well, then we'll get to the questions right after. So talking about being responsible and ownership, that is, if you take the word responsibility, that is what describes this classroom, is all of us taking personal ownership of our life. Now, we talked about really quickly that there are things we can do to help our bodies heal, but there's other things. We've talked about spirit, mind, and body, and how we can, become a better us. And so you have come up with a program. You have a new project that you're working on. And would you like to share a little bit about that?
Yes. Starting September 14th, we have a program called A Magnificent New Normal. Every day for 40 days, you'll get an inspiring, brilliant, life-transforming interview by a thought leader or world changer on how we can use this time, this unprecedented pause, to step into the highest version of ourselves and to create the highest version of humanity. Now, when I looked at what was happening in the pandemic, I saw a structure that I was familiar with in physical systems like titration curves, in human civilization and whatnot, in the structure of consciousness. I was looking at a time that I describe as a phase transition.
It is.
Which are different than other times in the past. Like in chemistry, you can be dropping drops into a solution, nothing will happen. And then all of a sudden it starts to change. And the information that goes into the system at that point, the quality of the drops determines the success of the outcome. I'm thinking everyone is now thinking about changing their life, doing something different, incorporating the lessons from the pandemic so that when they emerge, they're different. So we're actually in a collective bubble of a phase transition. And it's the quality of information now that will determine how successful we are at redefining ourselves, at reprioritizing ourselves. So I have people like Bruce Lipton and Lynn McTaggart and Nina Simons and Deborah Poneman and Zach Bush and Terry Patton and Matthew Fox and Eben Alexander and Eric Edmeades and Michelle James and Sarah McCrum and Ilarion Merkuliev. I mean, like the top shelf people. And what I've discovered, this is really exciting, that I was sensing that this was a time of great transformation forward. Yes, of course, there's some negativity. Yes, of course, there's death and disease. But what I was hearing from the indigenous people, Ilarion Merkuliev, Alberto Violdo, Anita Sanchez, Lynn Twist, representing the people from Ecuador, that there was actually prophecies about this time. So Lynn Twist, for example, also Ilarion Merkuliev talked about this actually as a gift from Mother Earth to stop us, to put us in a pause, to allow us to transform. Lynn Twist and Bruce Lipton both invoked the concept of the metamorphosis of a caterpillar, these are in the interviews, a caterpillar to a butterfly. And they both described our role. They said that the caterpillar becomes voracious and eats everything, like society, completely unsustainable. And then when it goes into the cocoon, at a certain point, the imaginal cells, like imagination, the imaginal cells, as if wake up, find each other. And if they can find each other, they can orchestrate a transformation from the caterpillar to the butterfly. And the butterfly looks nothing like the caterpillar. And these people and so many, Sue Morter, Catherine Woodward Thomas, Lynn McTaggart, they're talking about this as a transformation time where we are the imaginal cells. And that our job, in order to orchestrate the transformation, is to orchestrate our own transformation. That we're part of a collective non-local consciousness, interactive quantum level. And this is something that we describe, like Bruce Lipton in The New Science. He said, if you take a person's cells and you put them 100 miles away, and they've done this as an experiment, and you create a high emotional state of the individual, the cells react instantaneously. The mother to a child, same thing, because of this non-local relationship. and that you can measure consciousness at a distance, you can have an effect in the society. Yeah. So our work right now, if we're going to, what's interesting is this. If you look at the crashing systems, like we talked about the Protect Nature Now campaign, what does that require of us? It requires a new thinking. The antidote for all of these crashing systems is a new understanding in human consciousness that's not based on separation, that's based on a deeper understanding and connectedness to each other and to nature's intelligence. It's like a wake-up call. Now, in these other prophecies, which I haven't mentioned, there's an awakening process. I love the Lynn Twist interview. Don't miss that one, where she talks about the eagle and the condor, and there's these 500-year prophesied periods, and that we're just starting a new one, and there's a shakeup for the first few decades, like now, as a way to humble those in the eagle, which is the mind people, which is the Western, so that we understand our relationship with Mother Nature, so that we enter an entirely new way of life. That entirely new understanding is our out. It's something that individuals talk about. Eben Alexander talks about his near-death experience that he wrote about in Proof of Heaven. Sue Morter talks about her experience in meditation that was just simply mind-blowing. And people talk about the reality of consciousness from a quantum physics perspective rather than a classical physics perspective, and that this actually is something that human consciousness can achieve. And when we do that, our relationships change, our relationship with the environment changes, our relationship with ourselves change. We shift from the sympathetic nervous system to the parasympathetic nervous system so we can be in our prefrontal cortex. We have the Perlmutters talking about that, Tom O'Brien talking about that. We have so many people talking about the physiological shifts, so that our capacity to be the imaginal selves depends on us going through our own transformation. So that's why we've created a 40-day and 40-night program, totally free. You get one interview per day. If you don't have time, you can have 7 days to listen to an interview. It's not like fear of missing out and franticness. We don't want you in the fight or flight. We want you to relax. If you don't have time for a day, but you want that inspiration, just click and listen to the answer to the first question, which is, what is your vision for a post-pandemic civilization? Listen to that 40 times and align with your own vision. Or the second question, what recommendations do you have so the listener can become empowered and step into the highest version of themselves? And just listen to that every day for 40 days, or the experiential exercise offered by every single speaker that you can practice and try on your own. Mm-hmm. Or move through it as a community with our forum and have an assignment each day from each speaker. And also we recommend to get a journal. So everyone can create a journal, My Magnificent New Normal, and you can write down, because you're not going to transform with every recommendation from every thought leader every day. It's like, what are you going to resonate with? And yes. So we invite people, the resonating energy, the knowledge and the action, 2 sides of the page, the knowledge and the action. And how do you work with that? And then take the to-dos, the action steps, and distill that into My Magnificent to-do list. That becomes your new behaviors. And BJ Fogg, an expert at behavior change, talks about how to turn new behaviors into habits. He's one of the world experts from Stanford. He wrote the book, Tiny Habits. And then we have people talking about your passion, your mission, your purpose. So there's another section of the journal, My Magnificence. So you get to understand more about who you are. And so for those that then get into the empowerment package, they get to form into small groups, step into deepening and high levels of integrating their information. There's live, for those in the empowerment community, there's like 15 live events from these experts, interactive seminars, master classes, Q&As, and breakout discussion groups. The whole thing is driven by transformation science. And that is basically, how can anyone, whether they're a visual learner, an auditory learner, whether they're busy, whether they have a lot of free time, if you commit, this is the key. I don't recommend going into this casually, a magnificent new normal. I don't recommend going into this casually. I recommend, and this is one reason why we give people the opportunity to see what can happen civilization-wide. So if it's not for yourself, be the imaginal cell, for society. If you commit that this is a 40-day and 40-night transformation for you, then you take it seriously, and then you participate as a group and individually into a transformation process designed for you to redefine all these different spheres in your life, looking for those resonating gems from these outstanding interview speakers.
Yeah.
So that when you come out the other side, you have your own butterfly, and then you're contributing to the butterfly renewal of society.
It sounds wonderful. It's one of those things that I think many of us have been, geared towards. There's a thirst. And what you're doing, I'd love to. For those of you who want to learn more, we're putting the website on our Shop Now bag, and we'll have that on for you. If you want more information, you can text me at 407-373-5959, and then we will let you know when the link is put onto the website at whenyouneedafriend.com. As you guys also know, we're doing the Book of Revelations, a New Truth series. So everybody that's, that has been in this, I wouldn't say everybody, but most of the people in my circle of friends, we realized something's got to be done. And I started the I Am 99 movement, which is, how is this 1% of the 1% controlling the 99%? It's division, creating division. Well, how do we unite? How do we find one common purpose? And from there, the New Truth series, Book of Revelation with Dr. Lorraine Day, we're doing that, and people can join that as well. So there's so many different things that will resonate with all of us. We've got to do something. I think this is a wonderful thing. So I will get that information for you pretty soon, and it'll be up and loaded. So this starts on September 14th. That's 40 days and 40 nights. And the fig leaf will come, the olive branch will come back at you after that, right, Jeffrey?
Well, yeah, I mean, to me, when you look at the caterpillar, you cannot predict the butterfly. And the thing is, I think that for the people in your audience, as you just described, it's as if there's a very quiet bell going on, like a little alarm that usually is overshadowed by, we look around by the days and whatnot. We've become more quiet on our blossoming in place, and so we can listen inside more. But we're also being bombarded by fear-based messaging.
Yes.
There certainly are problems with the pandemic in the world that are tragic, and there's no denying. But I think that if this is in fact the fulfillment of these indigenous prophecies, or just simply a mechanical phase transition capacity for civilization, then the bell that's going off inside, if we put attention to it, it's actually asking us to do our part. What is critical and what comes up in each of these 40 interviews is there is no cookie cutter response for humanity.
No.
The basic theme is that inside every one, there is something that is magnificent, our magnificent new normal. And there's a respect and a sacredness and an honoring of each individual's sovereignty for determining and understanding what that is. And a lot of these speakers, well, they've chosen because they've stepped up to their calling. They're in a fearless place. They've gone through the roof of their voices on the bus saying, you're not good enough, you won't do it. And they've gone through that, and they're modeling and resonating as a model what it's like to step into their magnificence. And so we get that every day. Every day we get to stand taller as we get in relationship with these people. And then they are suggesting things that how we can uncover our own magnificence. And by taking it seriously, this is the time for transformation.
It is.
In the titration curve, once you get the plateau, you can't move again. This is, if you just get your old life back after this, what a waste. It could be the greatest lost opportunity in individual life and in history for humanity. Yeah. This is the cauldron that is calling us. And so we're doing our best to help people to make this transition as easy and as powerful as possible.
Absolutely. And for those of you who are listening on podcasts right now, if you join us later on, you can watch the video on YouTube or Facebook or BitChute, which, by the way, make sure you subscribe on BitChute, and you can tune into the questions. We're going to answer all your questions that you have. We have a few that I've not been able to ask you at this point. And so, Jeffrey, I am so glad you were worth the wait. I hope that whether it's the first part or the second part of the class today, that the students, all of us, have learned that it is time for us to take action. We can no longer rely on somebody else to do what's right for us. And just recently I interviewed David Icke, and I love, the concept that, even if you have fear, freedom comes when you do the right thing anyway. And that is so important, that even if we're fearful and we don't see the butterfly in the little caterpillar, that we can still know that it's going to happen. And so thank you so much, Jeffrey. Hold on, because we're going to have some questions. Make sure you like and share and do all that stuff. And please remember, we are right here waiting for you worldwide at whenyouneedafriend.com. Please remember that it's up to you if there's going to be change. This is Lillian McDermott and Jeffrey Smith. I was going to call you Dr. Jeffrey Smith. Wishing you love, peace, joy, and unexpected abundance. Make it the best day ever.
The opinions and advice expressed on the Lillian McDermott radio show are intended for the individual callers and guests on the program and are presented to our wider audience solely for general educational purposes. Please act responsibly and consult personally with your own medical, psychological, or nutritional expert before taking any steps to improve your life.
I got lost here on reading some of the questions. Okay, so I'm looking for some cues. I see a lot of comments. Okay, so I think we covered this already. Can GMOs cause acute food allergies?
Well, I've written a lot about this. I'll give you two examples. There's corn that has an insecticide called Bt toxin. Mm-hmm. And the toxin is designed to kill insects by breaking open little holes in their walls of their gut. Now, if you feed Bt toxin to a mouse, it will react. It'll have an immune system response, and it'll also become sensitized, so it will react to other formerly harmless foods or compounds. Similarly, people get immune system responses from Bt, from the spray version which is used in the field, etc. And so, yes, that's one example of an allergic reaction from eating the corn. But by causing the leaky gut, which the Bt toxin does, or Roundup, when you spray Roundup on the crops, that causes a separation of the cells of the walls of the gut. In a petri dish, and we believe it happens in the gut. That is also linked to allergic reactions. And it is actually a driver of inflammation, which is a driver of nearly every disease. There's also a damage to the gut bacteria, which, when that's out of balance, that can lead to allergic reactions. And there's also a suppression of digestive enzymes, so you don't break down the proteins as quickly, and that also can promote allergies. I can go on for probably 10 more minutes on the mechanisms, but what we do know is that when we surveyed 3,256 people who said they got better from 28 different conditions when they switched to non-GMO and largely organic food, more than half of them described getting better from allergies and food sensitivities. The number one improvement at 85% was digestive disorders, followed by fatigue, followed by weight problems, followed by brain fog, followed by anxiety and depression and other mood disorders, all above 50%. So there's a lot to look forward to on an organic diet.
You know, I remember back in 2013, I was interviewing Dr. Lorraine Day for the first time, and she was sharing about how the body can heal from just about anything, right? And the question at that time, I guess I have to go backwards a little bit. In about 1996, I started having major stomach issues. And for 2 years, they treated me for sinus infection with antibiotics. It God always puts people in your path, and it led me to doing some allergy testing. And as a result, I found out that I was allergic to wheat and dairy and peanuts and some nuts. And it was amazing that overnight I stopped those things and my stomach problems went away. But it took 2 years for me to figure out. And even my allergist said, oh, there are no connection with food and allergies, no connection. Well, I proved to him, and I knew that I was allergic to rye because of sugar buster diet that I was on that substitute everything to rye. And that's when my stomach problems started happening at that moment. So 2 years later, moving forward, I stopped all the foods that I knew I was allergic to, but we didn't know anything about GMOs. That was about the time where they started altering our food. And so I have saved myself from all, I was made fun of because gluten-free was not in fashion back then. So I have been gluten-free since 1996 or so, or 1998. And so I have avoided a lot of these things, but then there's corn, and you go to a Mexican restaurant and you start taking all those free chips and you eat them. So you're exposed in so many other ways and we don't even know about it. So I asked Dr. Day, moving forward, now 2013, and I said, let's talk about the organic versus conventional. A lot of people say that that all these conventional foods are okay. And she believes that organic foods is how we need to eat. And so she says, fine, go get yourself, some whatever food, and I'll just spray Raid on it. Are you going to eat it? And that's what she goes, go ahead and eat it. I'm going to spray Raid on it. Go ahead and eat it. And so she gave me this visual where I became very vigilant over GMOs, but still they hide them in foods. So what is your advice to someone who has been tested or maybe hasn't even thought of that their food might have a synthetic version of a modified organism that could be in foods that they're not allergic to?
So it's an interesting question. I recommend, first of all, an organic challenge where you don't just switch everything to organic that you can possibly do, but you also create a diary. And that the diary includes the percentage of organic foods that particular day and your energy level and your mood and all your symptoms 1 to 10. And do that for some weeks. Some people will, within 2 days, will notice a difference.
Yes.
The brain fog can go away sometimes in a day or two.
Yes.
The allergies and asthma. One doctor who had prescribed non-GMO and organic diets to 5,000 people said the mood lifts almost immediately. The allergies and asthma can take 3 to 7 days. The gut issues can be up to 2 months, but then you may have to rebuild it over a couple of years. That was her experience.
Yeah.
Okay. But she was also giving customized situations. So it was her experience. I've spoken to other doctors that put 9,000 people on a non-GMO and organic diet with simply stunning results. I have Michelle Perro, who's in both films, Genetic Roulette and Secret Ingredients. She will tell a family, okay, you have to be organic because your son is autistic. I'll treat the son. She doesn't treat the rest of the family. They all go organic, and the daughter who had ADHD gets better, and the father who had a kidney condition gets better, and the mother who lost weight. And they all get treated by organic food. And this happens over and over again. So she also saw that when the children, because she's a pediatrician, were coming to her after GMOs and Roundup were introduced into the diet, she had a whole set of complex diseases that were different than that had occurred before in large numbers of people. And the entire profession changed, both for pediatricians and also for veterinarians, that the animals that were being fed GMOs and the children that were most sensitive were changing.
Yeah.
And so the people that the practitioners that came in after that point thought that was normal. The practitioners that started before that said, what's going on? She read my books. She decided that it was probably GMOs and Roundup, started experimenting, and voila, it was. Same thing with the veterinarians. They went, maybe it's the GMOs and Roundup I'm reading about. They switched the food, and according to Barbara Royal, who's Oprah Winfrey's veterinarian, who I do interviews with, she goes, 90% change just from the food. And most of those, I don't even have to treat anymore because it was the food all along.
Yeah. I was challenged back in 2012 to go raw vegan for 1 month. And I said, fine, I can do anything for 1 month. And I started eating raw vegan. It was probably the worst 2 weeks of my husband's life because I didn't know what I was doing and I was learning. But what happened was that 4 or 5 days later, I was feeling really, really good. But here's the deal. I wasn't feeling bad. I just didn't know I could feel better. And I think most people don't know that their condition, wherever they're at, can improve with just little tweaks like that. Now, I'm no longer raw vegan, but for the most part, I eat a lot of whole food plant-based, and I'm very vigilant on the organic. It has to be organic. However, there are other where they say, oh, you don't have to worry about this one. There's nothing. What about some of the places from Guatemala and Mexico? You'll have all their foods. Is there a chart we can go to? Maybe any of your books that we can look at that says, okay, if it says Guatemala, or if it says Italy and it's a tomato in a glass jar, I know I'm good because they don't have GMOs in Italy. But is that accurate?
So you want to avoid GMOs and Roundup, and they do spray Roundup in Italy.
They do.
And they spray it's like Europe doesn't grow GMOs. Almost none, and but they do use Roundup. So more than half.
Man, you just ruined that for me, Jeffrey.
more than half of the city dwellers that were tested had Roundup or glyphosate in their urine. So they take it in from a variety of ways as a desecrant. Also, they eat more than half of the animal products come from animals that have been fed GMOs. More than 50% of the feed for the European market is GMO. But there's only 11 GMO food crops right now. You can go to non-gmoshoppingguide.com and you can find the list and also suggestions how to go out to eat and know what to eat. There's also the as we mentioned, the glyphosate testing results. A lot of great groups, Moms Across America, others have tested products to see what the levels of glyphosate are. We've done some of our own. We've compiled all of them. Everyone that does a test, we put together in a little database that's searchable. You can find that at responsibletechnology.org. So we also have a list of if you don't see non-GMO on the product, but you want to avoid GMOs, we have a list of all the hidden ingredients. High fructose corn syrup will come from corn that's genetically engineered. Cellulose may come from, a genetically engineered source. So you can be a detective. But if you can get organic, that's easy. You can just do one label and that helps.
Yeah, but organic processed foods are just as bad.
I wouldn't say just as bad.
Okay.
Organic if you're trying to avoid processed foods, then avoid processed foods.
Yeah.
But you can have organic products. You can have organic fake Oreos. You can have organic fake chewing gum. You can have the organic processed foods.
They have fructose corn syrup.
Well, if it's high fructose corn syrup, it won't be GMO and it won't be sprayed with Roundup. So there are ingredients in processed organic foods that you may want to avoid.
Yes.
However, if you have non-organic processed foods,
okay,
90% of them will have GMOs and maybe more will have products that have been sprayed with Roundup.
I hear you.
So if you have a child who's addicted to a processed food and you can get a organic version of that as the weaning process, it will have a higher quality input and output. And you may still want to shift to the non-processed foods in the time that it takes to make sure you don't freak out like the worst 2 weeks of your husband. 6-year-olds, you may not want to live with that 6-year-old while you're taking away those Oreos or whatnot. But we have suggestions in the 90-day lifestyle upgrade. We have suggestions from family members, parents who've done that, how they educated their kids so that they become the ones at the supermarket saying, you can't take this, Mom, because it's got a GMO. They'll be the scouts and they will understand that. Even in the movie Secret Ingredients, Kathleen DiChiara, whose family had 21 chronic conditions between the 5 of them until they switched to organic. The kids know, they bring their own food, their own desserts to the birthday parties, but they all know the effects of sugar and these chemicals and whatnot. So when they serve the cake, they look at each other and go, watch. And within 20 minutes, the kids are flying off the walls and they're parents are trying to regulate the kids. because they've just been fed the blue cake, and the sugar and all that
Yeah.
stuff,
Yeah.
the GMOs and the Roundup. So the kids now are more sophisticated than almost any adult because they saw what the results were in themselves, and they're dedicated to being healthy. And they know what happens to their mind. They know what happens to their mood. They know what happens to their stomach, and they know what happens to their skin. So they're dedicated to it. But it took some education. So we help people get that education for themselves and their families.
Yes, yes. Okay, so some other questions, and I think you answered this one already, but this is from Camilla. She said, how can the public influence a change of policy besides buying organic and non-GMO?
So I would recommend going to responsibletechnology.org and signing up. If you can make a donation because we're putting together a new movement. And the movement is to influence government decision-making around the world regarding release of all GMOs, including gene edited. The biotech industry has convinced governments that gene editing is safe and predictable, even though it's exactly the opposite. It's unsafe, it's unpredictable, it could be a disaster. So all these governments have been lined up to allow gene edited products onto the market without any government oversight. The United States, Australia, Argentina, Brazil, Japan. So we're mounting a global campaign, and we have a specific campaign we're going to launch at the beginning of 2021. And it has specific things that people can do on the grassroots.
Right.
But we can't release it now. We don't want people to know about what it is now. We don't want the other side to build a defensive posture against it. Let us surprise you and then train you towards the beginning of next year. So go to responsibletechnology.org, sign up for our list, and you will be informed.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. So Isela wants to know, and I think we've talked about this already, and I think I know the answer is going to go to responsible technology, but I'm going to ask the question, what are the most common GMOs foods to avoid? And also, what are the non-GMO oils to cook with?
Good. You can go to responsibletechnology.org. You can go to non-GMOshoppingguide.com, which also links from it. I will simply name the GMO crops. There are not many of them. Soy, corn, cotton, which is used in cottonseed oil, canola, sugar beets. Sugar beets are used for sugar. They're not the beets that you buy. Alfalfa, also used largely as animal feed. Those are all Roundup ready. Some of them are also Bt toxin producing. Then you have some zucchini and yellow squash, papaya from Hawaii or China, the non-browning potato and the non-browning potato and apple. Then you have salmon, which is supposed to be on the market later this year, genetically engineered. It's also
salmon.
Yeah.
Well, you're not talking about farm raised here. Are you talking about genetically modified salmon?
Genetically modified salmon from a company called Aqua Bounty has been approved. They're actually growing the salmon now for release in the United States. It's already been released in Canada. And I would say that is likely to increase allergens or toxins because of the preliminary research that they've done, but they did such small sizes, 6 fish, that they were able to eliminate all results from non-statistical significance. It was a sleight of hand rigged research, which we think was outrageous and potentially damaging the entire population of salmon-eating people. So there's also milk, meat, and eggs from animals that have been fed GMOs. And then there's the new gene-edited products, which will not require even government oversight. We won't even know if they've been released. There's been things approved, like a genetically engineered mushroom. We don't think it's on the market, but it could be deadly. We just don't know because the government requires no oversight whatsoever. So sign up, stay in touch with us. We'll let you know as new things come on the market.
Wow, wow, wow. It's almost as if everybody's in cahoots with one another. It's like the pharmaceutical company, I'm ready for all the medications I'm going to give you. The hospitals, I'm ready for all the people that are sick, and the food industry are going, we're going to feed it to you. We're going to feed it to you. It's a crazy triangle. And then the government is saying, okay, go ahead, whatever. We don't care, just as long as we're okay. So there's a question about, let's see, if non-GMO food plants are grown with water containing fluoride, does the plant then take in fluoride?
I don't know the answer to fluoride because it's out of my area, but I do know the answer to glyphosate because
Okay.
that is in my area. Unfortunately, there is glyphosate in the water supply, not everywhere. You can get your water tested. There's a link at responsibletechnology.org to get it tested. And if it is tested as it containing it, then there are water filters you can buy, which we have at livehealthybewell.com to clear that out. Now, there's sometimes it's in the rain too. Glyphosate is in the rain.
I was just going to say that
So that means a
it's in
lot
the
of organic,
line.
some
Yeah.
organic crops will have glyphosate residues because it
Yeah.
gets rained on. And there's nothing they can do about it because they can't import water to feed their crops as long as there's glyphosate in their rain. It's also in the air. 60 to 100% of air samples in the Midwest contain, and also water, rain and air. So the glyphosate, when sprayed on the crops, will enter because there's a surfactant that opens up the tissues of the plant. Now, unfortunately, it opens up the tissues, it opens up our skin as well. So if we get Roundup sprayed on us, it can drive the glyphosate into our bodies, and that is a disaster. So do not let anyone spray around you. You can go to rounduprisks.com and find out the dangers. And those are for people that want to stop the spray in their areas, from their city, from their county, from their homeowners association, the schools. If you go to rounduprisks.com, we empower you and train you to become an advocate and hook you up to all these different organizations that can help you. So it's good to answer these questions so people can protect themselves. Yeah.
Absolutely. And we also, and thank you, Victoria, for, saying support our local farmers, but are our local farmers using GMO seed? I mean, they may not be certified organic, but are they using the seed of the GMO seed?
It depends on where you live and who the farmers are. Of course, local poison is still poison. So local is not the be all and end all. Don't go local just because it says local. It has to be local and raised either organically certified or using the same protocols, the same policies as organic. Sometimes at a farmer's market, you can buy from someone and you talk to them. You say,
Yes.
is this organic? And they may say, no, but we are doing the organic principles. You say, do you spray anything? Because I'm sensitive. Tell them that you're sensitive. So they make sure they will not lie to you if you tell them you're sensitive. And if they say, well, we don't spray at all, or they may say we spray an organically verified, organic approved spray, and this is what it's called, and it's weeks before, and it's degraded in the sun, and it's washed off with the rain, and it's okay. Then otherwise, organic certification.
Well, very good. Or sustainably grown. That's another terminology that I've seen.
Sustainably grown, it's non-defined.
Ah.
The biotech industry tries to co-opt every word. So they'll say that GMOs are sustainable. And if some group says that their product is non-GMO, but it doesn't tell you how they determine that. If it's not non-GMO project verified, but it's self-certified as non-GMO, you don't know what their criteria is. Are they just asking their supply chain to be non-GMO and then writing it on their product? Are they doing testing? Do they have a high threshold or a low threshold? I called up Cheerios because their main original Cheerios says non-GMO. I said, what do you mean? They won't tell me. Same thing with Trader Joe's. Anything that bears the name Trader Joe's is supposedly non-GMO. They don't tell me, well, do they allow a 1% contamination, a 5% contamination? Do they have a testing requirement? Is there a sampling protocol that's secure? These are the things that I know. I used to work at a GMO detection laboratory that certified products as non-GMO. I was VP of marketing. I understand these things. There's some companies that don't want the public to know what their standards are.
Wow.
So they'll say non-GMO, but they'll keep it secret.
Okay, well, I know that Jeffrey is a very busy man. It took us a long time to get him here, and I hope you appreciate him for sharing his information today. Stay tuned because we will have the link up at whenyouneedafriend.com in the shopping bag section. It's called Magnificent New Normal. Now, if people don't start on September 14th and they want to continue the 40 days, can they join at any time?
Not only that, but I'm recommending that everyone tell their friends anytime during the 40 days. We're leaving the talks on for 7 days. The first 2 talks are available as soon as you register, no matter when. So theoretically, you won't miss a single talk, even if you start on day 9 and then start listening to the last 7 days.
Great.
But even if you start on day 30, you'll have 10 more coming, 7 from the past, and you can always purchase the package and get them all. And if you purchase the empowerment package, then that opens up all these live events, because that's like the people who are really serious about using this 40-day and 40 nights period for transformation. So you get to ask questions of Alison Armstrong and Tom O'Brien and Rick Smith and Holly Woods and Deborah Poneman and Alberto Villoldo, and these people that have specific times. And there's also, every Saturday, we have a breakout living room conversation based on themes from the previous week that help you deepen and integrate your understanding of those themes with the people that have purchased the empowerment package, the people who are serious about using this time as the critical time. So please, anytime during the 40 days, join.
Very good. I'll let that be the final word. Now you guys need to do your share. You need to share this video with all your friends, tag them in the comment section, do whatever you can to help us grow this classroom, because up to now, I did not realize that things were being suppressed in the media, and especially classes like this, and the information that we're sharing. Some people do not want you to know. So let's help each one another grow by doing everything we can to be empowering of self and others. So we'll say goodbye for